Hello, in this video I'm going to talk about pH. So the H in pH stands for hydrogen. So pH is really looking at what's going on in a fluid with regards to hydrogen, specifically what's going on with these ions called hydrogen ions. Now, you might not have known that about pH, but you probably have heard of pH before, and you know it's associated with things like acids and bases, and that is correct. pH is a really important topic in human anatomy and physiology, and that's because pH plays a very important role with chemical reactions. And of course, chemical reactions determine the physiology of the human body. So changes in pH can actually change our chemical reactions. So it's really important to understand pH in order to understand human anatomy and physiology. So as I mentioned, the H in pH stands for a hydrogen ion, and pH is the measure of the hydrogen ion concentration in a fluid or a solution. So first let's review what hydrogen is, and then let's review what a hydrogen ion is. Okay? So a neutral hydrogen atom has the atomic number 1, and it has 1 proton and 1 electron. A hydrogen ion tells us that it's going to be an ion, so it's going to carry charge. In this case, it's going to carry positive charge. So it's still hydrogen, so it still has the atomic number 1, and it still has 1 proton, but it has 0 electrons. So essentially, a hydrogen ion is nothing but a proton. So those two words are interchangeable. Sometimes when people talk about pH, they talk about protons, and sometimes they talk about hydrogen ions. It is ultimately the same thing. So hydrogen ions naturally form in any fluid containing water. And this is because water does break down. Water doesn't stay as H2O. Water breaks down into hydrogen ions and hydroxide ions. So a hydrogen ion is H+, a hydroxide ion is OH-. Now, in a bottle of water, most of the water molecules exist as water molecules, but some of them, a very few number of them, are broken down into H+ and OH-. So pH is determining how much H+ is present, how much hydrogen ion is present in the solution, right? So this is where acids and bases come into play. Acids are molecules that donate hydrogen ions to solution, and bases are molecules that can remove hydrogen ions from a solution. So let's take a look over here at the bottom of our screen where we have a beaker of water. Okay? Some of that water exists as H2O, and some of it is existing as hydrogen ions and hydroxide ions. But now let's add an acid to it, hydrochloric acid. Hydrochloric acid, when it's added to water, will break down into hydrogen ions and chloride ions. So now you can see how we've added hydrogen ions to the solution here. We had 1 hydrogen ion before the addition of the hydrochloric acid, and now we have 2 hydrogen ions. So hydrochloric acid is an acid because it donates hydrogen ions to a solution. Let's go back to our starting state again. Okay? Now, instead of adding an acid, let's add a base. Sodium hydroxide is an example of a base. Okay? When you add sodium hydroxide to water, it breaks down into sodium ions and hydroxide ions. The hydroxide ions, some of them will hook up with hydrogen ions in the solution. And when a hydrogen ion hooks up with a hydroxide ion, we get H2O. Right? And now you can see we have removed a hydrogen ion from the solution. Now we didn't remove the hydrogen from the solution. The hydrogen is a part of water now. But we did remove the hydrogen ion from the solution. And that's what a base does, is it removes hydrogen ions from the solution. It usually does this by adding hydroxide ions that can scoop up the hydrogen ions, forming water. Okay, so we got our water formation, right? We removed the hydrogen ion. This is a base. So pH is measured on a scale from 0 to 14. Under 7 is considered acidic, exactly 7 is neutral, and above 7 is basic. Right? Now, to understand the relationship between the amount of hydrogen ion and the pH value, we kind of need to look at some math. Right? So pH is actually technically a mathematical thing. Right? pH is the negative logarithm of the hydrogen ion concentration of a solution. What the heck does that mean, right? Well, we don't really need to worry about that. What I want you to notice is that pH is equal to the negative something, something, something. And you know how in math, whenever you put a negative in there, it kind of flips things around, right? So what this is telling you is that as the pH value goes up, the hydrogen ion concentration is going to go down. So there is an inverse relationship between the pH value and the hydrogen ion concentration because of the negative in this mathematical formula. And this is a point of confusion for students. This is something that students often get wrong when they are being assessed on pH. So keep this in mind. As the hydrogen ion concentration increases, the pH value decreases. And as the hydrogen ion concentration decreases, the pH value increases. You have that inverse relationship. So here we can see a pH scale right in the middle from 0 to 14. And to one side we can see hydrogen ion concentration, and to the other side we can see some examples of different types of solution at various pHs. Right? So let's take a look at some example solutions. Right? Pure water is exactly 7, pH 7. Right? And then if we look at the acidic end of the scale, which is the top end, the red end, you'll see a lot of foods on that list. Black coffee, tomatoes, vinegar, cola, beer. Right? A lot of our foods are quite acidic. Most of the foods that we eat aren't basic. There's a couple ones that are, but most of our foods are acidic. And looking down towards the bottom, we see the basic or alkaline end of the scale, right? We see a lot of things we use for cleaning on there, like household ammonia and household bleach, right? You know, extreme bases can burn your skin just like extreme acids can. You've probably had a bleach burn before, but didn't really realize what it was. If you get bleach on your hands, sometimes your skin will dissolve away and you get that real filmy base on there. Now notice that when we have a low pH, when the pH value is 0, we have a very high hydrogen ion concentration. And when we have a very high pH value, like when the pH value is 14, we have a very low hydrogen ion concentration. So there's an inverse relationship between pH value and the hydrogen ion concentration. So pH is a measure of the acid-base nature of a fluid. If the hydrogen ions and the hydroxide ions are in balance, we say that the fluid has a neutral pH. If there is more hydrogen ions than hydroxide ions, right, then we would say the solution is acidic. But if there's less hydrogen ion than hydroxide ion, we would say that the solution is basic. And the pH of pure water is 7, exactly neutral. Now, most solutions in the human body are made of water, but not pure water. Right? What's in that water? Well, think about blood. Blood has a lot of water in it, but it's not pure water. There's cells in there, there's proteins, there's ions, there's nutrients like glucose and amino acids and gases and wastes. So it's definitely not pure water. So many of our body fluids are close to a neutral pH because water is neutral, but it's not exactly neutral because it's not pure water. And the body has to work really hard to maintain the pH of body fluids, and we call this pH homeostasis. Right? The pH of your blood is anywhere from 7.35 to 7.4, and you don't want large fluctuations in that. Right? That can lead to massive problems. Proteins not working right, that sort of thing. So we work really hard to maintain pH homeostasis. So how do we do that? Right? Our first line of defense against changes in pH are using things called buffers. So buffers are substances that are capable of taking in or releasing hydrogen ions as needed in order to maintain the pH of a solution. I think of buffers as like a closet. It's a closet where you can store hydrogen ions when you don't need them. Right? So if the pH is dropping and you have too many hydrogen ions, you take them and you put them in the closet. You give them to the buffers. Right? But a buffer can also release hydrogen ions as necessary. So if your pH value is increasing and you need hydrogen ions, you can take them from the buffers, take them from the closet. So that's sort of our first line of defense against changes in pH. But the kidneys and the lungs play a major role also with regulating pH. If a body fluid becomes too acidic, we call this acidosis. And if a body fluid becomes too alkaline or too basic, we call it alkalosis. Acidosis is much more common in the human body. One of the reasons being that we eat a lot of acids, but also our natural body metabolism produces a lot of acids too. So we tend to have more of a problem with acids than bases. Alkalosis is a little rare. But acidosis and alkalosis can come about from problems with both our kidneys and our respiratory system, since both of those do play a major role with regulating pH.